Greetings, YouTube Loka. Today we're going to learn, we're going to continue with our stream of Phaladipika, which means we're going to be learning 3 new yogas. Why don't we quickly review what we got so far? Let's see. So when we got up to the 6th, basically we're on the 6th chapter. So the first chapter was mostly about the signs. Signs and planets. And the second chapter was about the houses. And the third chapter talked about the divisions of signs, like the amshas, navamshas, etc. And there were really no techniques discussed so far. It was just giving you the basic vocabulary of astrology. Then when we got to the 4th chapter, he spoke about how you calculate the potency of planets, which is called the bala, and six categories of bala, so shad bala. And then that was chapter 4, yeah? Yes. Then chapter 5, he started to interpret things. He started to show how you would work with interpretations, and he talked about career. Then chapter 6, which is where we are now, he started to speak about yogas. Yogas are basically more complicated combinations of things. For example, if you have a planet, if you have Jupiter in Sagittarius, then that's a yoga between Sagittarius and Jupiter. Is it not? It is. But it's a very simple yoga. We won't even bother to call it a yoga. We'll just call it a condition. But if you have Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 9th house, maybe you could call that a yoga, but you're starting to add more conditions to it. If you have Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 9th house aspected by the moon, then you could certainly start to call that a yoga. We're talking about combinations of, yoga means combination. So we're talking about many combinations of things. So he, first of all, that's what chapter 6 is dedicated to, discussing the yogas that are kind of classic to Vedic astrology. What does that mean? That means these are the yogas that through the centuries have been used by the teachers to explain astrology to the students, or even to share it with one another, to explain how complex interpretation is done. That's the difference between a series of videos on Mars and all the signs, or Mercury and all the signs, or Mercury and all the houses versus yogas. Is we're talking about more complex combinations of conditions. So there's like a stock set of Vedic yogas, which means the yogas that Indian tradition has used to explain how they do their interpretations in complex situations. So he began with talking about these Mahapurusha yogas, which are the yogas for the 5 major planets, the 5 starry planets, when they're in both a certain sign and a certain house. This is like the classic place to start. Like I just did when I said Jupiter and Sagittarius, technically it's a yoga, but not really. But Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 9th house, you might call that a yoga, right? So this is, for example, if you have Jupiter in its own sign in a Kendra house, then it forms the Swan Yoga, which I think we call the preceptor, the teacher, the exemplar. And if you have Mars in its own sign or its exalted sign in a Kendra. So that was the first group that he talked about. Then he talked about yogas that form by having some things next to other things, so specifically next to the moon, next to the sun, or next to the ascendant. So he went through a whole bunch of yogas there that form when things get next to, on either sides of the moon, or on either sides of the sun, or on either sides of the ascendant, which is here. Then after those yogas, he started to do individual sorts of things. This very interesting one called the Great Fortune Yoga, Mahabhagya, when you get synchronicity of masculinity or synchronicity of femininity. So for example, if the Lagna, moon, and sun are all in masculine signs during the day in a male's chart, or if they're all in female signs at night in a female chart. He talked about the lion-like one when the moon is angular to Jupiter. He talked about the cart when the moon is in what is it actually? Yeah, it is the moon in the 6th, 8th, or 12th from Jupiter, not angular to Jupiter, but in these kind of hidden houses. And then he had talked about this basic thing, what Kendra is the moon in relative to the sun. Now today, we're up to our new ones. Any questions, though? That was just the review. Now we're up to the new stuff. Everybody's ready? So for the new stuff, we got these 3 new yogas, Vasumat, Amala, and Puṣkala, which is wealthy, spotless, and abundant. So these are 3 really positive yogas. Wealthy, or Vasumat, is to have all the benefics in Upachaya to the moon or ascendant. We'll talk about these and I'll even give you examples. Upachaya is 10, 11, 3, or 6. Those houses. Spotless is benefics in the 10th from the moon or the ascendant, and abundant, or Puṣkala, is the lord of the moon joining the lord of the ascendant in an angle in a very friendly sign while a strong planet aspects the ascendant. As far as Sanskrit, it goes like this: Chandratva, that means the moon or, and then later he's going to say Lagnat, so it's the moon or the ascendant, mainly the moon. Chandratva Vasumangs, it will be called Vasumat. Tato Pachaya, in the Upachayas, Gair, if it goes into the Upachaya, Samastai Shubhas, all the benefics. Okay, Chandradva Vasumams Tato Pachaya Gair Lagnat Samastai Shubhas. All of the benefics have gone into either 3, 6, 10, or 11 relative to the moon or the ascendant. That would be called Vasumat, which means wealthy. Then the next one, Chandrat, again Chandrat, from the moon. Vyomni, that means the 10th house. Chandrat Vyomnyamala, it's called Amala, spotless. Vaya Shubhaka Gair, that means if the Shubhas, if the benefics have gone to the 10th house. Yogo Vilagnat Api, or also from the Lagna. So that means if the benefics went into the 10th house from the moon or even the ascendant, then it's called the Amala. Janmeshe Sahite. Janmeshe is the Lagna lord. Janmeshe is the moon's lord. Because this astrology system is more based on the moon. Like our Western system, the popular version of our Western system is more based on the sun. The popular version of the Indian system is more based on the moon. So when they say Janmesha, they mean the lord of your moon. Janmeshe Sahite, if it's conjoined with Vilagna Patina, the lord of the Lagna. Janmeshe Sahite Vilagna Patina. So if the lord of the moon conjoins the lord of the ascendant, that's a good thing. That's a good principle. Now add on top of that, if it's in a Kendra. That means if the lord of the moon and the lord of the ascendant are conjoining in a prominent place. So step 1, the lord of the moon and lord of the ascendant conjoin. It's nice. Step 2, lord of the moon and lord of the ascendant conjoin someplace visible and prominent, like a Kendra. Even more nice. Janmeshe Sahite Vilagna Patina Kendre Adimitraakshage. And if it is in a nice sign, so it's the same as, similar concept to the first Mahapurusha yogas, where the 5 planets could get these yogas if they were in a good sign in a good house. So now it's saying, if you take the lord of the moon, put it in a friendly sign, put it in a prominent house, and join it with the lord of the ascendant, that's really great. And then on top of that, Lagnam Pashiti Kashchit Atra Balavan. If there's a strong planet, Balavan, I mean, there's 2 ways to read this. The way that I'm reading it, kind of because I'm probably influenced by the translations that I've read, but the way that first comes to mind to read it is, if Balavan means a strong planet, is Pashati, seeing or aspecting the Lagna, the ascendant. Kashchit, if also. Or some other. So that maybe that's why it's more like that. Or you can say, if the moon is Balavan, strongly aspecting the sun, strongly aspecting the ascendant. It could be any planet strongly aspecting the ascendant. That's the way it's commonly thought of. Lagnam pashyati kaschiratra balavan yogo bhavet Puṣkala. The name of this yoga is Puṣkala, which means abundance. Like, as you can see from the yoga itself, it's like more and more and more good stuff. So this is like really, really, really enriched. Any questions? I'll show you examples of these now. So do malefics in the houses with the benefics offset this one? We don't. Interesting. I'll ask that question and we'll address that question in a second. What I'm going to do in a couple of seconds is put up a chart, like an empty chart, and we can move planets around to see what these yogas actually look like, and then we could talk about these questions a little bit less abstractly. So then the next text, he just gives you the effects. So let's just look at that first. This is Tishtye yu svagrihe sada vasumati dravyan yanalpanyanpi. So this is the effect of the wealthy yoga. You'll never lack money, even without leaving home. The effect of the spotless yoga is you're a moral person, enriched with wealth, fame, offspring, resources, and real estate. And the effect of the abundant yoga is a powerful person, like a great king surpassing all others, well-spoken, well-dressed and adorned, well-spoken of, thoroughly respected. So to slow down a bit and look at these words in a little more detail. Vasu means wealth or real estate or property. Real things. A real thing is a vasu. A real thing. Vasumāt means a person who has lots of real stuff. So a person who has money or resources. And the way you get it, again, is Benefics and Upachaya. The effect is interestingly explained. Tishtye yu svagrihe sada. The person is always in their house, in their own home. So one of the implications to that is they never have to rely on anybody else. They have their own income, they have their own resources, they have their own house. They're not paying rent, they're not living in somebody else's favor. They're supporting themselves. Tishtye yu svagrihe sada. That's one of the things that you get for Vasumati. But then dravyan yanalpanyapi. So this uppy part means even though they're relaxing in their own house all the time, they still never have a lack of money. It's an interesting way that they put it. Dravyani means all kinds of wealth. Analpa. Alpa means not enough. Analpa means not enough. So they never lack any kind of wealth, even though they don't really have to leave their house. So there's two important implications to Vasumāt yoga. The first implication is that they have a house, they have their own place, they don't have to rely on other people. The second implication is they don't really have to search for income and money. The money and income comes to them. This is actually the meaning of Upachaya houses. Upachaya houses are where you gradually store things. Upachaya means to make a pile higher, build a pile, build a savings. So if you have benefics here, if you have malefics here, it's also good. But malefics here will mean you're using, it won't be that you're always resting at home, but still you have money. Malefics in Upachaya house will mean you go out and you work and you succeed. Benefics in Upachayas means things come to you easy. You get money. You already have money. That's the implication. Then the next one that he explains was the spotless yoga. This is if you have a benefic in the 10th. So the principle here is the 10th place is the most visible. This is why it's called Vyoma. Vyoma means exposed. 10th house is called Vyoma because it's exposed. It's the sky. The highest point in the sky. It's the most easily visible thing. If you have a benefic and most people qualify this means only a benefic. If a benefic alone in the 10th house, then the most visible thing about you is going to be benefic. You're benefic. But what does a benefic mean? Those qualities of being ample and generous and being able to be generous so you have a lot, and also being nice and moral and good, forgiving, etc. So if a benefic is in the 10th from the moon or ascendant, a moral person enriched with wealth, fame, offspring, resources, and real estate. So the word for moral is nitiman. Nitiman means principled, really. They are principled. So, but yet they have sampat, or they have dhana and yasha. They get success and money, but not by being, not by screwing people over and not the typical way that you become rich and famous. Somehow, by being good and following principles and following their morals and sticking to their morals, they get success. So if the benefic is in the 10th from the moon or the ascendant, then the person should not deviate from the moral principle. If they stick on the moral principle, they'll get success. And then this last one, the Puṣkala, this was the really complicated one to get. Lord of the moon joins the Lord of the ascendant in an angle in a very friendly sign, while a strong planet aspects the ascendant. The result is a powerful person, like a great king surpassing all others, well-spoken, well-dressed and adorned, well-spoken of, thoroughly respected. So the words here, Shriman Puṣkala Yoga Jo. So first of all, it's going to be Shriman, which I didn't really translate, but it kind of means beautiful. This comes from the Pushkala Yoga. Nripavarai, like a great king. Sammanito, everybody respects him. Vishruta, everybody is speaking of him nicely, well spoken of. Swakalpambara Bhushita means well dressed and well adorned. Shubhavacha, well spoken. Sarvotama, surpassing everybody else. And Prabhu, powerful. So, you can sit there and you can try to memorize all this stuff, which is a noble effort and you should try to memorize this stuff. But the way to memorize it is, don't try to make your mind like a tape recorder. The best way to memorize anything is to understand it. Once you understand something, you don't forget it. And when you don't understand something, it's easy to forget it. Because once you understand something, you can see it around you a lot. You can see it working around you a lot. Until you understand something, you're not really sure what you're seeing. Well, once you understand things, then you see them in action often. And once you see things in action, you don't forget them because the mind keeps getting reminded of them. So the best way to memorize anything is to actually understand what it's all about. So you could sit there and just try to commit all this stuff to memory, but the best thing is to try to understand the principles. It's really pretty simple. Upachaya houses, they're where you grow your resources. Upachaya means where you build up a stockpile. You put benefics there, then it's very easy for you to grow your resources, and you have a lot of resources. Bam, you just remembered this yoga, and you really got what was intended for you to get by all these people over the centuries writing down this yoga and remembering it. You got this principle. Upachayas are for increasing your resources. If you put benefics there, it happens easy. If you put malefics there, you work for it, but you still get success. If you have nobody there, then you don't build it up. Spotless yoga, how do you remember this one? It's simple. 10th house is very visible. Whatever you put in the 10th house will be very visible in the person's character. If Saturn is in the 10th house, if Jupiter is in the 10th house, then Saturn or Jupiter is very visible in the person's character. That's all you have to really remember. Puṣkala, it's actually, this one is really complicated, but not so much really, because it's just a bunch of DNA from other yogas just put all into one creature. So first, the new thing here is Lord of the Moon joining Lord of Ascendant. And this is introducing a whole new category of yoga, which is going to repeat Lord of A joining Lord of B. This is the first time we've seen this, I believe. The Lord of Moon joining the Lord of Ascendant. The first Lord joining whatever is the Moon's Lord is a good thing, especially if it's in a sign which is favorable for the Moon or the Ascendant Lord. And especially if it's in a prominent house like a Kendra, and especially if it or somebody strong can aspect the Ascendant. So the principles there that you have are things which can aspect the Ascendant are very important. And things which affect the first. To have the Lord of the Moon and the Lord of the Ascendant be prominent and happy is very important. Right, so basically you have the DNA of the first yogas that we learned, the Mahabhagya yogas. Not Mahabhagya, the Mahapurusha yogas, where you take a planet and put it in a good sign in a Kendra. So you just take that little template and you make it applicable to the Lord of the Moon and the Lord of the Ascendant. Then you have this yoga, basically. All right, we can look at some of these in action and see what they look like on paper. Let's see, I have a couple of questions here. Is Puṣkala and Puṣkara the same? I don't think so. I think Puṣkara is the maker of nourishment, and Puṣkala is somebody who is nourished. Is it possible to have more than one of these in your chart? Yes. And if you would, how would you interpret? You would see the effects of both. What does strong mean? That would mean having, probably would mean having Shadbala. Since this author explains Shadbala before explaining the yogas, then it probably means that he wants the Shadbala. The Shadbala is fundamental to understanding the rest of the stuff. So henceforward, after explaining Shadbala, anytime he says Bala, it's probably referring to Shadbala. But you can simplify the whole thing down to basics and just saying it has good dignity. Does joining include multiple aspects, mutual aspects? Maybe. It's not the way he worded it. It was no. The way he worded it is Sahita, which means close together. But I wouldn't say that nothing is happening if they have mutual aspect. It's because it's basically the same principle. How close? In general, you just take a ratio. How close? So this basic is a question of how close together is a conjunction. So what we have is Parashara explains Sputadrishti and also Mantreshwara explained it previously, very briefly. Sputadrishti, which means how to calculate the strength of an aspect based on the degrees between the planets. So from that, we learned that planets influence certain points, and then the influence gradient has a gradient off till the next point. So you apply that same concept to the conjunction. If there's 0 degrees of separation between one planet or another, then the effect of the conjunction is 100%. And if there's 30 degrees, then it's 0%. If it's 15 degrees, then it's 50%. If it's 7 degrees, then it's 75%. It's simple. You just do a ratio. And how strong is strong? You want really 70% or higher is effective. An aspect or a conjunction of 70% or higher is effective. However, in some charts where there's nothing very strong, then whatever is the strongest will be effective. And the other thing to just bear in mind is if you cross the border of a sign, you should deduct some points. I forget exactly what I worked out the numbers to be. I think you should. I forget. But so in other words, if planets are like 10 degrees apart, then they're basically almost 70% conjoined, right? But if they're 10 degrees apart and one is at the end of one sign, one is at the beginning of the other sign, it's not as strong of a conjunction because the border between them is interfering. It's not nullified. The conjunction is not nullified, but the border does interfere with the connection a little bit. So good. I think I also addressed Ronaldo's question. Loanis wants to know what happens in inverse. I'm not sure. We saw inverse Mahabhagya in Marilyn Monroe and Angelina Jolie, or very close to inverse Mahabhagya. So it probably is. What I would say is the more that you line up masculine principles on these basic concepts, the rising sign, the moon sign, the sun sign, and the time of the day, the more that you line them up, the more the person has masculine assets. The more that you line feminine principles there, the more the person has feminine assets. It's going to actually, if a female has a lot of feminine assets, then she's going to be classically, typically female. But if you have a female has masculine assets, then she's going to have that spice, which is the mixture of having some confidence and boldness and assertiveness with all the beauty and intelligence and patience of a female. Or vice versa, if you have a male with a male Mahabhagya Yoga, then you have a classical, hard stereotype masculine figure. But if you have a male person with the female things lining up, then you have a man which is strong, kind of impervious type of basic nature with patience, intelligence, sensitivity of a female. Percentage of strength you need to look back for. The percentage of we did go over it. I did give you special graphs and everything, so look back in the playlists. Zena's asking. It's very simple. You just, for example, every planet has 100% aspect in the 7th position, so at 180 degrees. And every planet has 0 aspect in the 6th. So every planet has 0 aspect on the 6th, which is 150 degrees, and a full aspect on the 7th, which is 180. And then anything in between is just gradient. So if you're halfway between 150 and 180, which would be 165 degrees, and it's 50%, it's halfway between 0 and 100. Similarly, almost every planet has full on the 7th and 75% on the 8th. But if you're halfway between that, you're at 195 degrees from point A to point B, and it's going to be halfway between 100 and 75, which would be something like 82 or something. Hit the like button. All right. So let me show you what these yogas look like in charts. Which one do I need? Is it this one? It's that one. I got the right one, so I need to move my face over a little bit. So what do we want to look at first? The first one is Vasumāt. So the definition of Vasumāt is that we're going to have all the planets in Upachaya houses. We're going to have all the Benefics in Upachaya houses. So let's take a Benefic, Jupiter. Put him here. Okay, so there we have one Benefic in the 3rd house. I'll take another Benefic. Venus, put it here in the 6th house. That's another Upachaya. Are there any more Benefics? Not really. Those are the 2 really strong Benefics. Maybe Mercury. Heck, we'll put Mercury. Hey, you know what? Let's make this really good. We'll put Mercury here. Venus here. Venus in the 10th, Mercury in the 6th. So there you have a super duper Vasumāt yoga. So 3, 6, 10, also 11 is an Upachaya. But we like this one because the other principle of a planet should be in good dignity is also really strong here. Although this is actually impossible. No, is this possible? For this to happen, the sun could be... Yeah, this is impossible. You could never get Venus to be in Libra while Mercury is in Gemini. They never get that far apart from each other. So let me show you other ways that this would be possible. Even just this is a Vasumāt yoga. Or even just this. So you understand? The Benefics are in Upachaya houses. They're not anywhere else. That's what the yoga comes down to. Mercury is questionable if you want to keep it or not. So is this a Vasumāt yoga? That's questionable. It's basically a Vasumāt yoga. Mercury is not a very important benefic. It's a slightly benefic planet. But if you do have it somewhere like this, then you're increasing the power of the Vasumat. Now, another question. So somebody asked the question of what if you have Malefics? So this configuration is actually astronomically possible. But what if you have this going on? Is this still Vasumāt yoga? Yes. But does the presence of malefics there contradict or contradict this at all? No, actually, because Upachaya houses are desirable for malefics, especially these particular ones, the 6th and the 3rd. So no, this would not interfere with Vasumāt. Okay, and I'll show you something else which is important. You like this way of doing things? I came up with this yesterday. Take care, space bug. Or yeah, this is space bug. Take care, space bug. So now, what about this? If I put this here, and if I put this here, then I kind of don't have a Vasumāt yoga anymore, right? Because only Mercury is in an Upachaya house. Upachaya is 3, 6, 10, or 11. We only got Mercury. So, sorry, you don't get the Vasumāt. Is there a way to still get a Vasumāt out of this configuration? Well, it's actually based on the moon. So if you have the moon here, then this is Vasumāt yoga. I feel like I'm playing chess now, moving these pieces around. So because this is Jupiter is in the 3rd. Jupiter's in the 3rd from the moon. Mercury's in the 10th. And Venus is in the 11th from the moon. So that's important. It can be from the ascendant or the moon. So let me think of a really cool thing to show you. Here I've got Jupiter and Venus in Libra, the 10th house. And I'm going to put the moon here. That's double. That's a double Vasumāt yoga. Why? Because it's Vasumāt from the moon and from the ascendant. Moreover, the moon in the 8th house is particularly conducive to the effect of Vasumāt yoga also, because you'll get money coming to you. People will be giving you money. Just from the moon in the 8th house, it also supports that. So is there any other way to make this a double? Sure. You could put the moon here. Then it's in the 10th, then these two benefics are in the 10th from the ascendant, or the 11th from the moon. Like that. You could somehow make it into the 6th, which is this, right? Or this. This is the 6th. So you could put the moon here. Wow, that's also very good. Moon is exalted in the 5th house with the two benefics in its 6th house, which are also, and it's in the 5th from the ascendant, and the two benefics are also in the 10th from the ascendant. So these are really, really good examples of very strong Vasumāt yogas. Okay. Any questions about the configurations or the possible ways to get Vasumāt yoga? Can one have Vasumāt yoga if Jupiter and Mars join in Scorpio in the 4th house? No. Is the 4th house a Upachaya house? No. Priyadarshini, if you want to know if you have Vasumāt yoga, you have to know the positions of both the benefics. So tell me where Venus is. Now, I have the slow mode on, so you can't tell me. So let's say Venus is here. That makes a difference, okay? Makes a huge difference. Because it's about where both of the benefics are. I wouldn't consider, Katie, I would not consider conditional benefics. Although you're welcome to try. It's not like the case is closed, but I just wouldn't think so. You could make the 4th house an Upachaya house if you put the moon here. Now the 4th house is the moon's Upachaya. But where's Venus? You have to have both of the benefics there. We don't care that Mars is here. That's the part I tried to tell you before. Mars being here, I don't care. It's not part of this yoga. So if Venus is here, or if Venus is here, the 6th, or if Venus is here, the 10th, or if Venus is here, the 11th, from the moon, then yes, it is a Vasumāt yoga. Gosh, Marie is asking this other question. Is moon in, okay, I guess these are good questions. Is the moon is in the 5th. Venus is in the 7th. Is this a Vasumāt yoga? I told you, shame on you. I told you if you want to know Vasumāt yoga, you just say the positions of both of the benefics. The yoga is that you have all benefics. I mean, really, you should also tell me where Mercury is. I don't know if this is Vasumāt yoga because you didn't tell me where Jupiter is. It's part of a Vasumāt yoga because Venus is in the 3rd house from the moon. But I need to know where this guy is. If he's here, then it's not Vasumāt. If it's here, then it is Vasumāt. Does the dignity of a placement affected by the specific house? Is the dignity of a placement affected by the specific house? No, the house will affect the prominence, not the dignity. So, for example, let me see if I can give you an example. So, for example, Venus being here. Yeah, this is a good example. Venus being here is more effective than Venus being here. Even though in the second case, where it is now, Venus is exalted. And in the first case, Venus is in its own swakshetra, in its own field. And exaltation is a higher dignity than to be in your own domicile. But the domicile of Venus in the 10th house is more effective or prominent than the exaltation of Venus in the 3rd house, because the 3rd house is less prominent. That's for your question. Morphlink. Red says Jupiter in the 6th from the moon was bad in another yoga. Great, Red, good attention. That was part of a Shakata yoga. No, actually, let's rewind and look at that. Let's be careful about that and make sure Let me switch this over. Let's rewind and review that definition. Shakata, the moon in the 6th, 8th, or 12th from Jupiter. Okay, correct. While not in an angle. So the 6th is the least. The way that you would make those two things sit together in the same reality is that the 6th, for Jupiter, the 6th would be, from the moon, would be a little bit not as good as being in the other conditions. Good attention, Red. Attention to detail. Let's look at these other ones. All right, Zenith. So let's say Jupiter is in the 8th, Mercury in the 9th, Venus and Moon in the 11th. Is this that yoga? Okay, this is the last question about Vasumāt. Let's look at it and see what you say. We got Jupiter in the 8th. We have Mercury in the 9th. Venus and Moon in the 11th. Now she wants to know, is this Vasumāt yoga? So the question is, are these guys in Upachaya houses? The Venus is in Upachaya, but no other planet is in Upachaya to the Ascendant. How about relative to the Moon? The 3rd house is Capricorn. The 6th house is Aries. The 10th house is Leo. And the 11th house, I mean, in this particular example on screen, the 11th house is Virgo. So not really, because Venus and Jupiter have to be involved. Mercury is optional. So no, if it was this, if you reverse the positions of Mercury and Venus so that it's this, then yes, this is Vasumāt yoga, sometimes called Vasumati. Yay, Dinishta. Visual things actually help you stay focused, don't they? So the specific from Zena's question is 2 of the 3 benefics enough? If the 2 are Jupiter and Venus, yes. Mercury is optional, but the other 2 are not optional. All right, let's move on and look at the next one was Amala. The definition of Amala is just the person is going to be have a very benefic nature to them because they have a benefic alone in the 10th house. So for example, boom, there's an Amala yoga formed by Jupiter relative to the Ascendant. And if you put Venus here and the Moon here, then you have 2 Amala yogas. One of them is formed by Jupiter relative to this in the 10th from the Ascendant, and the other is formed by Venus in the 10th from the Moon. If you go back to this and you put this here, it is not an Amala yoga. You're still going to have this. It has the. It's not an Amala yoga, but it was almost an Amala yoga. So there's still something, but it's mixed with the fact that you have an exalted Malefic in the 10th house too. So Malefics have a different flavor. Malefic flavor is strong, tough, commanding, dominating. Benefic nature is compliant and helpful and generous. And moral. Malefic nature is doing whatever it takes. Benefic nature is doing what's right. So in here you have a mixed situation, so it's not Amala yoga. So this one is very simple, right? You can have any one of the benefics. Mercury is not very strong benefic, but it's optional. Any questions there? This yoga is very simple. So let's say you have, it's very simple because there's only one way you can get it. You have to have that. If you have Venus here in the 9th, then you have to have Moon in the 12th. If you have Jupiter in the 8th, Venus in the 9th, then you could get it with Moon either in the 11th or the 12th. Morphling wants to know if Rahu and Ketu are considered malefics. No, they're like Mercury. The malefics are Saturn and Mars. The benefics are Jupiter and Venus. Don't make it more complicated than that. The next tier down is the Sun and Mercury. Mercury is kind of malefic. The Sun is kind of malefic and Mercury is kind of benefic, but not very drastically. Then the rest of the planets you have is the Moon and the 2 nodes, and they are case dependent. Did I say Mercury? Moon and 2 nodes. Look, since we got a screen here, in the 1st house I'm going to put the malefics. In the 7th house I'm going to put the benefics. And that's it. And Mars is even more malefic than Saturn, and Venus is even more benefic than Jupiter. And over here, I'm going to put the guys that are conditional. That are kind of, sort of. Sun is sort of malefic, and Mercury is sort of benefic, but they're not really strongly benefic or malefic. And then you have the Moon, which can go to either side depending on circumstances, and it's the same thing for Rahu, Ketu. Right? You like it? That's correct, Murray. All right, and let's look at this other one. Now, this other one is really going to need a chart. The Puṣkala Yoga. Puṣkala Yoga, let's read that definition one more time. Let me get all of my little chess pieces off the board. Puṣkala is the Lord of the Moon joins the Lord of Ascendant in an angle in a very friendly sign while a strong planet aspects the Ascendant. Okay, let's pull this apart. So, the Lord of the Moon. We have to put the Moon somewhere first before we can go anywhere forward with this. So let's say we got the Moon here. Okay, if you have the Moon there, then the Moon is in Gemini. That means the Moon's Lord, the Janmesh, is the owner of Gemini. It's Mercury. So now Mercury is up for grabs. Mercury is important. And then the other planet, it's the Lord of the Moon joining the Lord of the Ascendant. The Lord of the Ascendant is this guy, Saturn, because the Ascendant is Capricorn. Capricorn belongs to Saturn. So we want to put these two guys together. We want to put Mercury together with Saturn. So that would be the first component of a Puṣkala, of an abundance yoga. Any place. This. Anywhere you get these two guys together. The second component is it should happen in a Kendra. So that means only here. Let me see if I can grab these guys. Yeah. Only there or here or here or here. Then it says it should be in a good sign. So now we're kind of narrowing it down. It can't really be here because that makes Saturn debilitated. It could be here because Mercury is friendly to Saturn. It's not really so great here. It kind of weakens here because neither of them is friendly to the Moon, especially Mercury. but this would work. So if you have the moon in Gemini in the 6th house, then you need Saturn and Mercury to be either in Capricorn or Libra only. That's it. Those are the only 2 options. Then so that's the first 2 conditions of the yoga. The first condition is that the Lord of the Moon joins the Lord of the Ascendant, and the second condition is that it happens in an Ascendant. Oh, and the third condition, it's in a good sign. While a strong planet aspects the Ascendant. So, how about this? We're going to assume that Jupiter is at a good degree relative to the Ascendant, and now it's strong. It's being in a Kendra. And Exalted, you can't really go wrong with it, with deciding that it's strong. So that would be Puṣkala Yoga very strongly. You could also get it with Jupiter here, because it's strong by being in a trine, and it aspects the Ascendant. You could put the moon, you could put Mars here. And you could argue that this is a Puṣkala Yoga because Mars is going to aspect the Ascendant because it has 100% aspect on the 8th house. And it's strong when it's in the 6th. Those are options. You could put Mars here. It would be strong by virtue of being the 10th house, and it has 100% aspect on the 4th, which is the Ascendant. I would even say you could put it here, or you could put almost any planet there. I really just wouldn't put Jupiter there. And then you get the Puṣkala. So let's see if that makes sense. Let me give you another configuration with the moon somewhere else. Okay, so we'll do this one more time, and then I'll look and see what the questions are. Let's say we have a chart. I can't change the Ascendant very easily, so you're stuck with Capricorn. Let's see we have a chart like this. So the only difference will be, instead of Mercury and Saturn, now it's going to be Jupiter and Saturn. Because if the moon is in Pisces, then Jupiter is the moon's lord. So let's say we stick the moon's lord there in the 10th house. Then Saturn has to also be here because he has to join. And Saturn. So this would be a conjunction of the moon's lord and the first lord. It would be a conjunction of the moon's lord and the first lord in a Kendra. And at least Saturn is exalted. Jupiter is not in the best of signs, but at least Saturn is exalted. You could have it happen in any one of the Kendras, but if you put it in Aries, you're kind of spoiling it because Saturn will be debilitated. If you put it in Capricorn, you're spoiling it because Jupiter will be debilitated. So it would be best if it was in Cancer or Libra. I want to see how this looks when I move this around. Any questions? Okay, cool. You can actually see it move. Yeah, for aspect on the Ascendant, any strong planet, no matter Benefic, Malefic, yes. Thank you, Ayo. If the Lord of the Ascendant and the Moon were in a sign that was mutually negative, would it have a similarly inverse effect as the Mahabhagya Yoga? I haven't thought about that before. How is Pushkali Yoga different to Dhani Yoga? It's much stronger than Dhani Yoga, and Dhani Yoga doesn't include all these things about being well-dressed and well-respected and well-spoken of and well-spoken. It's not, Pushkala Yoga is not just wealthy, but Vasumat is wealthy. Pushkala Yoga is, everything is abundant, opulent. Pushkala Yoga is opulence, so opulence comes across in the clothing, in the ornamentation, in the words that come out of your mouth, in the way that people think of you, as well as in the amount of money that's in your wallet. What if all the planets were in the Ascendant and only Jupiter was in the 10th? What if? What do you mean, what if? It would look like this. I mean, you just stick everybody in the Ascendant. The only important thing that you have from today's selection of yogas is that it's Amala yoga. But obviously, this chart is pretty tricky and strange chart. You shouldn't just go too heavily on just Amala yoga. But so moon shouldn't be debilitated in order to achieve such yoga. It's okay if the moon's debilitated. This is just fine. To achieve what yoga? Puṣkala? Pushkali. Here you can get Puṣkala. You ready? Moon is in Scorpio. That means that Mars is important. And the ruler of the first is important. So here's Puṣkala. That's perfectly fine. Debilitation is not the end of the world. It doesn't cancel out yogas and things. Yeah, push means nourished, but Puṣkala is like opulent, having been nourished fully. All right, that's it. That's all I have for you today. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And I will see you in 2 days for the 4th canto of Bhagavatam. Thank you.